Lassie and her day in the sun. That's Lassie the dog. Lassie was stretched out in her favorite spot by the side of the road when Mr. Briggs, the rural mail carrier, drove by. "What a lazy life that dog leads," said Mr. Briggs to his friend beside him. "Nothing to do but lie in the sun and sleep the day away." After Mr. Briggs had driven on, Lassie stood up and stretched. Then she trotted over to the Smith's place to see the new puppies. But the puppies weren't in their pen. Somebody had left the gate open. The puppies were wandering out on the road, and a big truck was coming. Oh dear. Lassie ran as fast as she could. She got between the truck and the puppies and she barked at the driver. He stopped his truck just in time. Mrs. Smith rushed from her house as Lassie nudged and pushed the puppies off the road. "Oh, Lassie," said Mrs. Smith, "those puppies might have been killed except for you. Good dog." Lassie wagged her big bushy tail. Lassie turned along a lane that led to Mr. and Mrs. Green's. Back of the house, Mr. Green had left a pile of leaves burning. There it is. The wind was blowing and the burning leaves towards a field of tall weeds, and the weeds were catching on fire. Lassie raced to the back door. She scratched and barked until Mr. Green and Tommy came out. "Good gracious," said Mr. Green when he saw the fire in his garden. He quickly turned the garden hose on the flames. He's put some water on the flames. After the fire was out, Tommy shook hands with Lassie. "Thank you, Lassie," he said. "You prevented a bad fire. It might have burned down our garage." Lassie went on her way. She stopped at a stream for a drink. 2-year-old Timmy Mac was leaning over the edge of the stream, watching some fish. Suddenly, Timmy lost his balance and fell in. Splash! Lassie grabbed Timmy by the seat of his pants and pulled him out. Timmy's mother and his sister arrived in a hurry. "Lassie," she said, "you saved my little boy." A short while later, Lassie came on Farmer Bell. He was having trouble driving his sheep through a gate. Lassie knew how to herd sheep. She barked and nipped and got the sheep through in a jiffy. "You've been a great help, Lassie," said Farmer Bell. Lassie trotted over to Mrs. Lawson. She found Mrs. Lawson dozing outside her kitchen door. A smell of something burning came from the kitchen. Lassie pulled at Mrs. Lawson's skirt and awakened her. "The stew," Mrs. Lawson said. She ran inside and snatched the pan off the stove. "It would have burned up except for you, Lassie," Mrs. Lawson said. Lassie headed down the hill. A group of boys and girls were coming back from gathering hazelnuts. They were crossing Mr. Neal's pasture, and in the pasture was Mr. Neal's bad-tempered bull. The bull saw the children. It lowered its head and charged towards them. Lassie raced into the pasture. She made straight for the bull, barking and snapping. The bull turned to chase Lassie, and the children ran down to the fence and climbed over it. "If Lassie hadn't come along," one of the boys said, "we would have been in a bad way." Lassie finally returned home and stretched out again in her favorite spot by the side of the road. A few moments later, Mr. Briggs, the mail carrier, drove back down the road. "Look at that dog," Mr. Briggs said to his friend. "She hasn't moved since we were here early this morning. What a lazy, useless animal." But she had moved, hadn't she? She'd been all over the town, helping everybody. Lassie raised her head. Her mouth was open a little, and she looked as if she might be laughing. Perhaps she was. The end.